Hi, I want to read a book to you. This is about ordinary people who change the world. This one is called I Am Gandhi, written by Brad Metzler, illustrated by Christopher Lopoulos. I am Gandhi. Today, people call me strong, unafraid, unstoppable. I wasn't always that way. As a child growing up in India, I was shy, afraid of the dark. I was also afraid of snakes. Ooh, a snake. Want to see it? I would very much not like to see it. Can you tell I was small? I spent most of my time with books. I wasn't good at sports like soccer. In fact, I'd run home after school afraid that people would make fun of me. But I liked taking nice long walks. A long walk is a great way to spend the day. Try it, you'll like it. Even with all my books, I wasn't a great student. I was bad at multiplication. And one day, when I got one of our spelling words wrong, the teacher pointed to another boy's paper. What's he doing? Gandhi said. He wants you to copy it from me, so you'll get the right answer. I didn't think that was the right thing to do. That's not how you learn. When the teacher scolded me, I wasn't bothered. In my life, I did not copy others' work. However, there was one story that was worth copying. It was a play I read in school about a man named Shravan Kumar. Shravan was so devoted to his parents that when they were too old to travel, he literally carried them on his back. Gandhi says, "This is a picture I will never forget. It was an example I wanted to follow. One person carrying others who needed help." Can you see? See what that picture looks like right there? That really influenced Gandhi's choices. My father had a good job. He was a political leader, but there were many who had no jobs. There were the poorest of the poor. They were treated terribly and had the worst jobs. There were even different laws that applied to them. Back then, the British were so powerful, they ruled India. And to get a good job like my father, I eventually moved to London, England, and became a lawyer. I even dressed up real fancy, trying to look rich and more British. So here they're having a conversation. Mohandas, see how many poor there are? When you are born poor, life is hard enough. But in India, there was a group of people called the untouchables who weren't allowed to make a better life for themselves. So if they were born an untouchable, they were always an untouchable. They couldn't do anything to improve how their life was going. When I moved back to India, I had my first case in court. This was the moment I trained for. All I had to do was question the witness. He's saying, he doesn't look so good. Gandhi was saying, I don't feel so good. The moment I stood up, my heart sank to my boots. It was like the room was spinning. I sat back down without a word. Here's your money back, said Gandhi. You need to hire someone who's good at this. That was my first case, and I completely failed, said Gandhi. Luckily, I got offered a new case in a country called South Africa. I was excited to try again. As I took the last part of my journey by train, a white passenger noticed me. Hey, he shouldn't be here. This is first class. Gandhi said, but I have a first class ticket. He didn't like me because I was Indian. My skin was brown and his was white. Believe it or not, he had the law on his side. The train official asked me to leave. He said that if I didn't leave, he'd call the police. Well, yes, you may, I said. I refused to get out voluntarily. Why don't you go sit in third class where you belong? A policeman pushed me out of the train and tossed my stuff onto the station platform. It was cold in that station and dark. I could have gotten back on the train and sat in third class. Instead, I stayed there all night shivering. I also meditated, which is when you close your eyes and try to focus your mind. To finish the trip, I took a horse-drawn carriage, but once again, because of my skin color, they didn't let me sit inside with the white passengers. The driver hit me in the ears and tried to drag me down. I never hit him back, but I refused to let go. You'll sit out here as we go, he said. On the footboard. That's not fair. I will not do so, said Gandhi. Leave him alone. Let him be, said the white people that were on the stagecoach. Eventually he gave up. But this is how Indians were treated back then. To change it, I knew I had to take action. I had to fight, even if it meant suffering hardship. Within a week, I held a meeting for my fellow Indians in South Africa. It was the first public speech of my life, and I focused on the truth. They treat us unfairly because of our skin color. We must stand together and change the laws. Back then, Indians weren't allowed to be out after 9 p.m. We were limited to certain jobs like being a hotel waiter or a coal miner. We weren't even allowed to use the paved sidewalks. After the speech, we all had a discussion. There are times to talk, but there's also real power in listening. That's a good life rule for all of us. Soon after, I decided to stay in South Africa and form the Natal Indian Congress to help Indians there become more active in the government. I purchased a farm where I took over a newspaper called Indian Opinion. I wrote about the government and why it's good to be a vegetarian and not eat meat. I even published articles by my favorite thinkers like Henry David Thoreau. But the most important thing I did there was come up with the Sutyagruya. Sutyagruya. In Sanskrit, it combines the word Sutya, which means truth, with Agruya, which means firmness or force. Truth Force? It sounds like a superhero team. Truth Force! Indeed, Sutyagruya was my truth force. Sutyagruya was how we'd fight against the unfair treatment of Indians. So the first thing they did was non-cooperation or civil disobedience, protesting an unfair law in a nonviolent way. The second thing, nonviolence using love and peaceful methods. The third thing was non-possession, living a simple life that uses only what you need and nothing more. Is that why he dressed in such a simple cloth? That's the reason. Truth force. Was I perfect? Gandhi said. No. Sometimes I lost my temper. But that's when I figured out the best way to fight by transforming myself and being the best person that I could be. Isn't that interesting? He wanted to change the world. So he started by being the best person that he could be. Again, such a life lesson. In no time at all, I tested out Suchiguruya. A new law was passed that would kick Indians out of South Africa unless they registered with the government. Police could stop us on the street and search our homes anytime that they wanted. They're doing this only to Indians. And he's keep carrying a sign that says, treat Indians fairly. So what can we do? Well, we'll refuse to register. General Smuts said, if you don't register, we'll arrest you. Well, it won't stop me from what's right, said Gandhi. For breaking that law, they put me in prison for 2 months. They put me there again for breaking another law, one that said Indians couldn't travel to certain areas. Gandhi cooked for the other prisoners and volunteered to clean the toilets. That's gross. Gandhi said, only if you believe it is. Doing hard work makes you a stronger person and a happier one. Reading my favorite authors' books helped me keep learning about how to change a bad system without violence, and how even when your body is locked up, your mind is free. So what you think, you still own that part. I'm not sure what that means, Gandhi said. It means my message and my thoughts are stronger than these prison walls. You know what's even stronger than that? People working together. Soon we started more settlements and farms where those who practiced Suchaguya could live a simple life in peace. At Tolstoy Farm, we focused on praying, studying, and making things, and working in our garden. What are you making? Leather sandals. Gandhi wasn't just leading us, he was providing for us too. As our peace army grew, so did our strength. When the South African government made Indians pay more taxes than white residents and refused to improve the safety of coal miners, we decided to protest by striking. No one will go to work tomorrow. As we marched together, what began with a few dozen people, which means about 24 people, 24 to 36 people, it grew to over 2,000 people. The more of us they arrested, the more people joined us. It was just like Thoreau taught. Instead of using violence to protest the unfair rules, Indian people used a peaceful method. No one went to work at the coal mines. Without workers, the coal companies would go out of business. Now the only question was, would it succeed? Would it work? It took years, but the South Africa government passed the Indian Relief Act of 1914. So that was over 100 years ago. 107 years ago, improving the lives of many Indians. I gave one of my greatest adversaries, the general who had me arrested all those years ago, a pair of leather sandals. He said, why are you giving me these? Gandhi said, I made them. They are a sign of friendship. Better to make friends than enemies. Truth Force wins! Truth Force! After 21 years, it was time to take what I had learned in South Africa back to my home in India. India was still being run by the British, who treated us terribly. And worst of all, Indians still treated some other Indians terribly too. Gandhi, there's a family outside. They need a place to stay, but they are untouchables. We should turn them away. We need to carry others who need help. Let them in. Everyone is welcome here. To protest the unfair British laws in India, we held another strike. For one full day, no one went to work. All of India. Every shop, farm, restaurant closed down. The British got so mad they sent their soldiers to an event that celebrated the religious New Year for many Indians. Over 10,000 people were gathered peacefully in a place called Jallianwala Bagh. Get the Indians! The soldiers attacked the crowd. Over 1,000 were injured. Hundreds were killed. They hit us hard. It was tempting to hit them back. But violence will never get you what you want. As the head of our own organization, the Indian National Congress, I called for massive boycotts, which meant we would stop going to British schools and stop working for British employers. I know what we must do. Truth Force, please say we're using Truth Force again. We did. Instead of buying British clothing, I urged people to use spinning wheels like this to make their own clothes. I would spin thread every day. I even made this cool outfit. By representing independence, his spinning wheel, because so popular, it was on the original design for India's flag. I didn't know that. Can you see that? I had to make sure that as many people as possible heard my message. To do that, I relied on the same thing as when I was younger. I walked. India was over 1 million square miles. The poor lived in hard-to-reach villages, so I traveled to them. For 7 months, I ate the same meal 3 times a day. Same thing, 7 months, same meal 3 times a day. 16 ounces of goat milk, 3 slices of toast, 2 oranges, and some grapes or raisins. Only by standing together, rich and poor, could we be free from this unfair government. Only united are we unstoppable. That didn't mean that everyone was on my side. Even though my work against the government was peaceful, the British again put me in prison, this time for 6 years. I smiled as they took me to jail. I did not mind prison. It allowed me time to read, pray, learn, and keep spinning. But within 2 years, I got sick there. The government knew people would be enraged if something happened to me. So they let me out. I went right back to my mission. The British government still wouldn't leave India. They passed new laws called the Salt Acts, which said Indians couldn't make or sell our own salt. We had to buy it from the British. Now our food tastes terrible. We need independence. This country is ours, not theirs. Gandhi said, I'm writing a letter to the government warning them this is their final chance to change the laws. Time for more truth force, isn't it? How could we convince the British? We marched. On March 12th, 1930, 78 people joined me as we headed towards the sea. Walking. I wonder why. Why are they headed towards the sea? I was 60 years old, walking 240 miles, 10 miles each day for nearly a month. Where are we going? You'll see. The farther we walked, the more people joined us. They poured water on our paths to keep the dust down. They tossed flowers and leaves to make it easier to walk on. The crowd soon ballooned to thousands, stretching back for 2 miles. Reporters around the world told our story. I still don't know where we're headed. You'll see. The British want us to stop. Then we must keep going, said Gandhi. "24 days later, we reached our destination, the village of Dandi, near the Arabian Sea. There, I gave my signal to the nation." What's he doing? There's something in the sand. Look at him reaching down. I picked up a handful of salt left by the waves. That's it. I never raised my fists, and I never carried a weapon. But in that act, holding salt that wasn't bought from the British government, I fought back. I broke the law with the entire world watching. It seems like a really dumb law. I think a lot of folks agree with you. Truth force! Soon after, I was arrested again. But over the next few days, thousands of Indians broke the same law. Just a few clumps of salt united our people and made the whole world realize how poorly the British were treating us. From there, it still took years, but we were on our way to India becoming a free country. My struggles weren't done, though. Remember the untouchable, the poorest of the poor? They were still suffering. I was in jail, but I could act. What's he doing, he says. He says he's fasting, that he won't eat until the untouchables are treated fairly. Doesn't this guy ever give up? Gandhi said, no, I don't. And I never will. Sir, people all over the country, they heard what you're doing. They're treating the untouchables fairly now, letting them into their temples. Gandhi said they could lock me up, they could put me in the dark, but they could never, ever defeat me. Remember what Gandhi said about his mind. It was stronger than his prison walls. In my life, I was the small one, the skinny one, the poor one, even the shy one. But I was never the weak one. Over many years, I had many fights. But to fight by purposely avoiding violence, to refuse to raise your fist, no matter what is raised against you, some would call that foolish, madness. But what it really is, truth force. It truly is courage. Today, Gandhi's famous Satyagraha is as powerful as ever. It inspired civil rights movements all across the world, including those led by Martin Luther King Jr. and Nelson Mandela. For his amazing work, people started calling Gandhi Mahatma, which means great soul. We also call him Bapu, which means father. or Bapu. I'm not sure how that word is pronounced. Did you know even today the flag of India is required to be made of the same homespun cloth made famous by him? And remember the general who Gandhi made those sandals for? Really, the general was like Gandhi's enemy, but Gandhi didn't let it stay that way. 20 years later, as a sign of friendship, he returned them to Gandhi, saying that he'd worn them many summers, but was never worthy to stand in the shoes of such a great man. Truth force. Strength doesn't come from the size of your body. It comes from the size of your heart. Show love, especially when you want to fight unfairness. You must help others who are in need. Carry them on your shoulders. Speak up for them when they don't have a voice. Hold true to your beliefs. Truth force. I am Gandhi, and in a gentle way, I will shake the world. There's a picture of Gandhi. Gandhi when he was 7 years old. Gandhi had his spinning wheel that he used to make his clothes. This is Gandhi during the Salt March. And the current Indian flag, which still has a spinning wheel on it to represent Gandhi and his spinning wheel. And there's a timeline on it. There you go. Thank you for listening to the story. I am Gandhi. Bye.